Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's go around and say our names. My name is Jim.
I'm Scott. Jay. Alex. Tara.
Umeboshi.
Scott. Jeff.
George.
Peter. Jay. Steve. Patrick. Nicholas.
Snake.
Randy. Greg. Jeffrey. Jonas. Jay again. Paul. Bill. David. Lee. John. Jack. Peter. Ed. Clint.
And my name is Jai.
Jai.
Jai, Jay. Yes,
Yes, Jai. Cool.
Jai.
Pleasure. Anyone here for the first time? I think that's you. Great. Your name again?
Alex.
Alex, welcome. Anyone else?
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey? Jeff. Well, welcome. And we're delighted to have Jay Kumar here today, who is a very accomplished scholar in ancient cultures. He's currently in a doctoral program at UCLA. He's studying Sanskrit and has a specialty in things Vedic. And is that?
Sure.
You have an extraordinarily accomplished. Let's see. He currently conducts both private and group instruction in Sanskrit, Latin, ancient Greek, French, and Italian, not to make anyone feel insecure. But he also offers private consultations and workshops in the integrative Vedic sciences of Ayurveda, yoga, philosophy, and Jyotish Astrology. Mm-hmm. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
So again, my name is Jai Kumar, and just to add what was said earlier, I have a pretty interesting background. I come from an academic background as well, but also from a very strong spiritual aspect. I'm trained academically as a scholar of ancient languages and cultures, with my primary focus being in Sanskrit. As well as in my other life, I suppose I should say, I'm also a yoga instructor. I'm a yoga therapist. I teach at Yoga Tree, just around the corner from here. I'm also an Ayurveda consultant. I'll be talking a little bit more about Ayurveda in just a little bit. And I'm also a spiritual counselor as well as a Vedic astrologer. So kind of a jack of all trades. But today's talk's interesting. I was telling my partner Jeffrey that as of yesterday, I still had no idea what I was going to talk about. And Jeffrey said, talk about something you know. So I said, okay, I'll talk about procrastination. No, in all honesty though, I'm really going to be talking today about something that I really am impassioned about, and that is spirituality and healing. In my many years in my spiritual unfolding, my journey itself, I have gone through many disciplines, many traditions, and what I found ultimately, what boils everything down, is that we are here as souls to embody our beauty and our truth. And in the process, we purify ourselves away from the illusion, if you will. And so I'll be talking a little bit today about primarily how Buddhism, the title of today's talk actually is Buddhism as a form of psychospiritual healing. So that really is going to be the focus of today's topic. And in the process, I'll be talking a little bit about Ayurveda, which is the yogic branch of health and medicine, of which Buddhism heavily influenced as well in ancient India. And I'll be talking also about some Sanskrit terminologies and how we can really see more precisely the healing aspects of early Buddhism in very specific Sanskrit terms. So I'm not going to make this too academic, because I know this is not an academic discourse that I want to talk about. So I'm going to talk maybe 40 minutes or so, and at the end just open it up to group discussion. Okay? All right. So how many people here are familiar with Ayurveda? Just maybe a show of hands. Just have heard of it, kind of know roughly what it is. Okay, if you don't, that's okay. Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word, and for those who don't know what Sanskrit is the ancient language of India. Many of the ancient Indian spiritual texts, Hindu texts, as well as some of the Buddhist texts, are written in Sanskrit. And Sanskrit is this very revered holy language that was spoken maybe about 4,000 years ago in ancient India. But in the Sanskrit language, Ayurveda breaks down into two words. Ayur, which means life or livelihood, or longevity of life, and Veda means wisdom. So Ayurveda is the wisdom of life. It's the wisdom of living. Or as I like to call it, it's the art of being. And really, ultimately, we are all souls being over here as human beings. And so I kind of like to talk about the nature of the soul from how I believe it really happens, as well as tying into what the ancient spiritual texts from the Buddhist, the Jain, and the Hindu disciplines have all kind of talked about the soul. For those of you who may be aware, Buddhism originated in India with Gautama Buddha over 2,500 years ago, and it spread throughout the entire South Asian continent and around the world subsequently. But Buddhism has been influenced heavily by Hinduism as well. And one thing which you find common in both Hinduism and Buddhism, and also Jainism to some extent, is that of what we call the transmigration of the soul, or in other words, reincarnation. And what the soul does, which is really wonderful, is that I like to share this story with you because I think it gives it's a nice metaphor to understand the nature of the soul. How many of you, when you were younger, or maybe still do, play hide and seek? Okay. Do you remember how fun that was when you were really young, or maybe still are playing hide and seek, who knows, with your friends? And how fun it was to just, hide all these treasures and then hide all these little things and you had to find them. The soul does the same thing. When the soul comes down into physical body or physical existence, it plays this game of hide and seek. It hides all these beautiful aspects or jewels of the soul into various incarnations and various lifetimes. And it plays this game where it comes down into physical body and has to hunt and look for these treasures. There's a catch, though. When the soul comes down into physical body, it experiences what I call amnesia, which we know in the Buddhist tradition as Maya, or the illusion. And so when the soul comes down to physical body, it forgets who it really is. It forgets that it's this divine aspect of pure bliss, joy, and wholeness, and divinity. And when we come down into physical body, we experience the amnesia, and we're stuck in the Maya, which again is the word for illusion in the Buddhist context. But we have the help from the universe, and we have the help from our other fellow soul travelers. The universe provides us with these various clues to help us discover these beautiful treasures of ourselves. It may come in the form of a challenging situation. It may come in the form of an illness. It may come in the form of a great, magnificent experience. It may come in the form as your life partner. It may come in the form as your children or your parents. But we are all here helping one another to discover our treasures. It's kind of like, when you play hide and seek, and you get closer, your friends say you're getting hot, you're getting hot, you're getting hot. If you're going away, you're getting cold. The universe does the same thing. It provides you with situations to enable you to get closer and closer to these treasures. So ultimately, the goal is for us to discover all these treasures and all these divine aspects of ourselves. And in the process, we discover and learn more about who we are as souls. Now, the soul goes through various, I would say, phases of its evolution. And according to the ancient Indian texts, this is in the Hindu and the Buddhist tradition, they talk about there being 4 distinct phases of the soul. And as the soul progresses into more and more incarnations, it advances on in its spiritual journey. It's like, how many people here play video games, or just know something about video games like Nintendo? Okay. You know how there are different levels in Nintendo. Okay, you've got to pass level 1 before you got to level 2. Okay, but imagine how boring it would be playing level 1 of Nintendo after you've already mastered it the 5th go. Okay, so the soul plays this cosmic game of Nintendo with you. The universe does. The universe plays this cosmic game of Nintendo with your soul. And every lifetime, you have the ability to advance on to the next level, the next level, the next level. So in Indian spirituality and Buddhism and Hinduism, they talk about there being 4 distinct phases of the soul. So when the soul first comes down into physical body, it's like, awesome, I got this physical body. I've got, like a mouth to eat food. I can have sex. I can do all these great things with my body. And the soul is just delighted to be in corporeal form, physical body. It still is in the midst of the Maya. It has no idea what its true purpose is. And so the first few phases, or the first few lifetimes in the first phase of the soul is called, in Sanskrit, it's called kama, K-A-M-A, which means desires. And so I affectionately like to call these lifetimes where the soul experiences these desires as the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifetimes of the soul. It's all about having fun, experiencing the hedonistic lifestyle of whatever it is that we choose. What's that?
More and more here.
Yeah. And so ultimately the soul decides, okay, I've had enough of that. I've mastered all that. Now it's time to move on into the next level of the Nintendo game. So it then moves on into its second phase of its journey, which we call in Sanskrit Artha, A-R-T-H-A, which literally translates as material prosperity. So in these lifetimes of Artha, the soul experiences aspects of ego, control, power, material possessions, greed. Okay, these are some of the illusions. These are the soul is still stuck in the illusion of the Maya. It's not quite sure. It's not aware yet of who it really is. So ultimately, this gets very tiring. And I like to affectionately say that people like George Bush and Saddam Hussein and Bill Clinton and all these politicians, they're still stuck in the whole Artha, second phase of their journey. Okay. Ultimately, what happens, the soul enters into its third phase of its journey, which we call Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, which should be a term familiar to many of you. Dharma is the literal translation of the word dharma. In Sanskrit, means truth or purpose. And it's in the third stage of the soul's evolution that the soul begins to, what I call, wake up from the amnesia. It's at this point the soul begins to discover that there's something more going on in this world than just what we see in the illusion of the Maya, if you will. And these are the lifetimes in the Dharma phase, or the third stage of the soul's evolution, which can be the most painful and the most challenging. And the universe knows that these lifetimes can be really challenging, but it also knows that as souls, we have the ability to transform into greater beings of consciousness, until ultimately we reach the fourth stage of spiritual evolution, which is called moksha. Sometimes in the Buddhist tradition, we can refer to as nirvana as well. But moksha is a word which literally means spiritual liberation. We break away from the fetters that bind us to the Maya, that bind us to the illusion. This is what the Buddha did. The word Buddha actually, does anyone actually know what the literal word of Buddha means? Awakened. Exactly. It's awakened. It's awakened from the amnesia. It is someone who has reached a Buddhahood or a bodhisattva has attained the level where it has finally awakened from the amnesia, from the Maya, if you will. And this is ultimately where all souls want to be at. And so what Buddhism offers us is that Buddhism, or any spiritual tradition for that matter, but specifically in Buddhism, Buddhism actually offers us a way to experience the moksha, or the attainment of spiritual liberation. Because Buddhism, at its heart, is really a modality of psychospiritual healing, which is now the focus of the next topic, the next subject of the talk. So, in ancient texts, in ancient Buddhist texts, there are strong references to Buddhism and medicine and healing. And part of my Ph.D., the topic of my Ph.D. dissertation is actually in the evolution and development of medicine and healing in ancient India. And so I've actually read a lot of the Buddhist texts in the original Sanskrit and some of the Pali languages as well. And what really struck me really remarkably when I started reading these texts is just how strongly parallel they are to what we find in current medical dialogues, in medical treatises on just healing and how the process occurs. So who here, or just anyone can answer this question, who here can tell us what are the 4 noble truths? Exactly, okay? So we'll talk about what they mean in just a minute. So basically, there are 4 noble truths. There's dukkha, then we also have the samyutta, then we have nirodha, and then we have marga. And I'll talk about these in detail right now and how they relate to medicine and healing. So the very first Arya Satya, or called the noble truth, the Arya Satya, states in Sanskrit that sarva dukkha asti, all is suffering. Okay, everything is suffering. Okay, what we mean by this is that all of us, as long as we're still clinging to the illusion of Maya, are bound up in the suffering. Ayurveda, which again is the yogic branch of the ancient Indian system of health and medicine and healing, states that at the moment of conception, the soul is in a perfect state of health and well-being on all levels. It still is a manifestation of the pure consciousness of the soul, and it's healthy and it's whole in every single way. However, when the soul, when a human being is actually born and actually has to experience life in the samsara, in the physical plane of existence, this is when we have the tendency to go away from health into illness. Now, illness doesn't necessarily have to be a physical illness. We can also suffer from spiritual illness as well. And spiritual suffering, the Buddha says, is a part of life in the samsara that we all need to overcome. So the very first Arya Satya, the noble truth, is that all is suffering, which we call dukkha, D-U-H-K-H-A, dukkha, which means suffering. Everything is suffering. So we then move on to the second noble truth, which is that of the cause of suffering. What is the cause of suffering? Which they call in Sanskrit is the samudaya. Okay? The samudaya is the cause of why we are suffering so much. And the cause of that is because we still are in the amnesia. We're still in the maya of it all. And as long as we believe that what we experience here in the physical plane is being real, we're still stuck in the illusion. Okay, we're still stuck in the suffering. And this is the cause of that suffering, is being stuck and being misguided to believe that what we see here is reality. Okay, it's still part of the illusion, the amnesia. The third noble truth is that of stopping the suffering. Okay, the intention and the willingness to stop the suffering. This we call nirodha in Sanskrit, N-I-R-O-D-H-A-H, nirodha. And nirodha is what I like to call the existential crisis. Every one of us, at some point in our lives, goes through what I like to call affectionately the existential crisis. Why am I here? What's the purpose of it all? My purpose of existence. What's the greater meaning of my soul's purpose and soul's journey? And this is finally the phase where we begin to make and set the intention on a conscious level, on a soul level, to heal ourselves from the suffering, to heal ourselves from the pain of being stuck in the illusion. So this ties again, just really quickly, to what I talked about in the very beginning with the 4 different stages of the soul's evolution. The third stage of the soul's evolution, again, is called Dharma. And in the third stage of the soul's evolution, Dharma, those are the lifetimes, if you will, that the soul says, okay, enough is enough. Time to stop. Time to stop the pain. Time to cease and eliminate the causes of my suffering. And again, this is the third noble truth, the Nirodha. Okay. Finally, we get to the fourth noble truth, which is Marga. And Marga is the way in which we are able to stop the suffering. So the third noble truth is that we have the intention, the Nirodha, to stop the suffering. The fourth stage gives us the means or the manner in which we can stop the suffering, which is the Marga, which we in Buddhism is the Eightfold Path. Okay. So again, to recap those 4 noble truths: dukkha, all is suffering; samudaya, that we have the cause of what the suffering is. Well, we want to know why we are suffering, the cause of it. The third is we have the intention to stop it, the nirodha. And the fourth, the marga, is how we're able to do this. Okay. So when you look at this in the context of healing, it's very interesting. A physician, if you ever go to a doctor, okay, or a psychotherapist, any practitioner of health or healing, the first thing that they'll discover is, oh, you're in pain. Okay, what's the suffering? Okay, I can tell you're in pain. You're suffering, either on a physical level or a mental or spiritual level. You're suffering. Stage 1. Okay, that is the dukkha, the first noble truth. Then your physician says, okay, now we have to find out what the cause of the suffering is. Okay, why are you in such pain? It's what we call in medical terms the etiology, or the cause of whatever is your discomfort. So we do diagnostics, or in a medical context, they would do tests, and they would kind of figure out, they would probe and see what is the actual cause of all this suffering. Finally, we get into the third stage, the nirodha, and the doctor says, okay, now I know what the cause is, we can stop it now. We can stop the disease or the illness from spreading. So the third stage, nirodha, is already there. And finally, the fourth stage, okay, is the physician, or your mental health practitioner, whatever the case may be, will offer you the manner or the modality or the therapy in which you to heal yourself. So there's a very strong parallel. What I'm really getting at here is that as far back as 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, when you read the ancient Buddhist texts, they actually tell you, like pretty blatantly, in clear language, that the 4 noble truths parallel the exact same manner of ancient medicine and healing. The 4 noble truths, again, the cause of suffering, okay, and again, the second noble truth, again, being that we get to the cause of what the suffering is, the third, stopping it, and the fourth, the manner. Same thing happens in any form of medical therapy. So in this way, Buddhism is really a profound modality of spiritual healing. And now we look to see how we go about using Buddhism or any spiritual practice that you choose to be following as a manner in which to heal the body. Okay. So when we talk about healing the body, we really talk about healing the soul. In Buddhism, it's really about healing at the soul level, whereas the physician may heal the body. What Buddhism offers is that we have the ability to heal the soul. And what's very interesting, when you read the ancient spiritual texts, ancient Buddhist texts, rather, around 2,000 years ago, they actually refer to the Buddha as Vaidya Raja, the king of physicians. So the Buddha actually, there are such strong parallels, or I would say medical terminology, that you see existing in the ancient Buddhist canons, the Pali canons, the Pali texts. And so the Buddha himself is actually called the king of physicians. And he removes the three arrows of poison, which are called the samyojanas, which are greed, hatred, and delusion. So just as a physician would remove poisonous arrows from your body to heal it, what the Buddha, the king of physicians, will do is that he will remove the poison arrows that are created by the illusion. Okay? Delusion, greed, hatred. Okay? So what's also interesting is that the ancient Buddhist texts also talk about the ability for the Sangha, or the community, to act as the healing core of the Buddha. The Sangha, or the community that we're here right now, the Sangha, or the group community, just being in a Sangha of like-minded people who are committed to their spiritual unfolding, who are committed to having themselves wake up from the illusion, to cease the suffering. The Sangha itself, the ancient texts say, is the medical core of the Buddha. The medical healing team of the Buddha is the Sangha. The medicine itself is the Eightfold Path. The medicine that we allow ourselves to heal, as we know, the Eightfold Path. Anyone tell us what the Eightfold, what they are? Or maybe one of them. Sure.
Concentration, effort, mindfulness, livelihood, action, speech, thought.
There you go. So if you follow all those are your medicines. Those are the medical therapeutics that you need to heal the body and the soul in the same process. So, I'm trying to think, how are we doing on time over here? 11:36, not too bad. So again, the ancient Buddhist texts say that all sentient beings are patients of the Buddha. The medicine is the Eightfold Path, and the medical team, or the nurses, is the Sangha. And the Buddha, again, is the Vaidya Raja, or the king of physicians. He's the kingly physician that heals the body and the soul. Now, it's also very interesting when you look at the ancient texts. Also, when you actually read the text in Sanskrit or Pali, whatever language the text happens to be written in, you get a really deep understanding of the sense, again, of Buddhism and this very strong parallel to medicine and medical terminology. How many here of you know or can tell me the definition of nirvana? It's a sneeze, is what it is.
Yeah, there you are. You just
sneeze of relief, exactly. The literal translation of nirvana. Can anyone tell me what the literal translation of nirvana is?
Extinction.
Extinction of what, though?
Oh, that's a good question. Desire, I suppose.
Okay. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Extinction of what?
So the whole karma. The karmic circle.
Okay. Right. Okay.
There's an ultimate translation, no universe.
Yeah.
No.
The literal translation.
It's not like passing gas.
No disturbance.
No disturbance. Okay. That's actually a very good close little translation. Nirvana actually breaks down to two roots. Nir, which means absence or away from, and vana means pain or harm. So again, nirvana is the absence of suffering. Again, it's the absence of pain. It's the absence of the suffering that we create for ourselves in the Maya, in the illusion. And what's very wonderful is that when you see in the text as well, there are other words that are used for nirvana. And one word which comes up again and again as a substitute word for nirvana is arogya. A-R-O-G-Y-A. And arogya literally means freedom from illness. So again, what the point I'm trying to impress on you over here is that Buddhism really has this notion of how the spiritual practices of Buddhism actually are medicine. They're a form of therapy. And in reality, as we practice Buddhism, as we practice the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, we, in a sense, are experiencing the healing and the therapy on a soul level. It's a psychospiritual modality of healing at its very deepest level. And I probably want to just maybe conclude and just say a few more things before I conclude and open up into some group discussion over here. That ultimately, all of us are seeking to be healed. All of us seek to experience the moksha, or the spiritual liberation. And this only begins to happen once we acknowledge that we are in suffering, that we are bound in this maze of the illusion, that we're stuck in the Maya. And ultimately we have the power to understand the cause of what this suffering is. And we have the intention to make it stop. And then we have the choice on how we can use what manner we choose to make the pain and the suffering stop. And this is again where spiritual practices come in. Meditation, prayer, chanting, right actions, doing good deeds, being in the Sangha. These are all ways in which we can use this as medicine to heal the soul on the very deepest level. So I'll just conclude by, again, just saying that when we read the ancient texts, there really is this wonderful witness that we see in early Buddhism, where early Buddhism and early Buddhist philosophy really saw the spiritual practice of Buddhism as a form of medicine, as a form of healing. And how we do this and how we can perpetuate this in the modern world, again, is to be observant of the Eightfold Path, to be observant of setting our intentions on what we want on a soul level, practicing mindfulness, practicing compassion, practicing truth, following our dharma, or our purpose, our soul's purpose. And ultimately, we discover our treasures that we have hidden for ourselves. And they turn out to be beautiful jewels. Namaste. So,
thank you, Jay. I'm sure there are some questions. Discussion.
Thank you. That was lovely and inspiring. I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. But I have one huge question to the whole thing. It's one. Two paths to get into the question. One, I'll try to make it short. One is you started with Buddhism and the ancient texts of Buddhism, and you mentioned
Jainism, right?
Also going on in that area of the world at the time were the tantrics, and
right.
You didn't mention any of them, and a lot of the Ayurvedic people, I've heard Bod, I think his name, there's a Bod, and Sabota.
Oh, okay, right.
Mentioned that the yoga, the tantra, and the Ayurveda are a triad that come together very well. Yeah. And as Buddhism went into China, of course, it mixed with the Taoists, and there's a lot of Taoism that's similar to this vein. And these two tendencies don't really posit as the central problem the suffering.
Right.
Because if I start from my experience as a gay man, coming to San Francisco is not suffering.
Right.
It's
Right.
quite the opposite. The life and abandonment and excess here is much greater problem, as I experience. The way consumerism stokes our sexuality, the way, America has not a problem with suffering, but of the other, going the other way. And I'm not clear from what you were saying how we might address those kind of imbalances. We have to transform these excesses, and it's not transforming suffering. It's slightly different.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you feel there's another tendency, the Tantra, that's something separate from what you're doing, or if that's just another lecture for another day.
It's probably another lecture because there's a whole discourse I gave on tantric aspects in Buddhism and healing. Just basically, Tantra or tantric philosophy came about much later than If you look at the
tantric texts existed before the Buddha was enlightened. Several texts are Sanskrit.
There's some debate on that because Tantra definitely had its foundation or flourishing, I'd say, more in medieval India, which would probably be more like around the 800 AD.
Yeah, that's when they started being killed by the Muslim infidels and so on.
Right. But the tantric viewpoint has a different perspective on this, and I just really the focus here, and thank you for clarifying that, is that I was really focused specifically on the original Buddhist canon, the philosophy of the early Buddhist texts that state this strong parallel between life is suffering, and trust me, I'm not suffering. I mean, I love my life. I don't feel like I'm suffering, but there are many souls who are trapped still in the suffering. I'm not saying we all are. And, I'm saying that most of us here, being mindful and being Buddhist, know that we have the means to end the suffering and are taking positive actions to do that.
It seems to me this recapitulation that you said of the four eonic stages of the soul's development into one life. I can go through those four stages in an instant. I mean,
exactly.
That's where Buddhist psychology works for me, because I throw myself into hell. I remember I don't have to be there. I try and I come back to myself.
Right.
This happens cyclically to me.
Exactly.
All the time.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, all day long. Is that also another level of application that you see?
Yeah. So I wanted to maybe just elucidate more on that. Again, I talked about the four distinct phases of the soul according to ancient Indian thought. The first being the desires, the second being the material prosperity, caught up in the material prosperity. Those first two phases of the soul, the lifetimes of desire, the lifetimes of ego and power, that is pretty much the thick of being in the Maya, the thick of the suffering. Okay, I would venture to say that all of us are probably in the third stage of our soul's evolution. Just being here, we're being mindful of we know that we are committed to our dharma, to our purpose, to our truth, and that the dharma stage again is when we begin to wake up from the amnesia, and ultimately will lead to moksha. But what happens is that someone who is in the third stage of their soul's evolution, the dharma, will still experience the two lower ones, whereas someone on the first stage does not experience the higher ones. So people who are spiritually evolved on a soul level, as all of us here are, we will experience not only the dharma, but we'll also experience the lower ones as well, the desires and the material prosperity and the ego and all that. And ultimately, we know that we have glimpses of how we can eradicate this and how this can lead to spiritual liberation.
Thinking about this thing with souls, as far as I have understood, Buddha never really said that reincarnation is something which happens. He said that somebody asked, how would you live your life if there was reincarnation? He didn't say it was existing as such, and I think that's something which probably comes from Hinduism and other local religions or something. As being a scientist, I have a problem with reincarnation and souls, because that means you can count them, because they're specific and they are separate. A soul is separate from everything because it is an entity of its own, and that's the way it's treated. Whereas in Buddhism, it seems to be more that you think of that you're not separate, you're actually part of everything, and you're part of your father, you're part of your mother, you're part of Earth, and I don't know. So making the concept of a soul is again creating an ego and a separateness, which is what we're trying to avoid. So talking about healing the soul becomes kind of funny then, because it's essentially more becomes an issue of realizing that you are not separate and there is no souls, and that you are just part of the, I don't know, master source or whatever. You're part of
universal consciousness. I agree with that. I agree that all souls originate and are born from universal consciousness, which is the oneness of everything. And what happens, the soul decides to, individual souls decide to come out of this unity, of this universal consciousness, so it can play the game. So it can come down into physical form and play the game. Okay? But ultimately it knows, on a higher level it knows, or that it's forgotten what it knows, that it's ultimately just one. It's tied into all other souls, and all souls are interconnected into universal consciousness. And so I'm not going to go into discourse on the concept of reincarnation. We could be here for days talking about that, or lifetimes, talking of no pun intended, about reincarnation. But I agree with what you're saying, is that the Buddha didn't really specifically say that reincarnation is something that has to occur. The Buddha actually said we have the power in whatever lifetime you're in to make this your final incarnation, and to make this, you don't have to come back, basically. This is it. You have the power to experience moksha in any lifetime you choose.
And that would be the end of delusion or something.
Yes, right.
Maybe you talk some more about spiritual seeking. It seems like there's an inherent contradiction in the sense that it could be seen as being motivated from escaping pain and pursuing pleasure, even if it's not like low shock of pleasure. And how they can just continue the cycle and break out of the cycle. So, I don't know how this question is as lucid as it could be, but could you kind of maybe talk a little bit about a spiritual path, what you're doing, concept of evolving or increasing consciousness without it being this continuation of past behavior of seeking, as I said, to pursue pleasure and escape pain.
Okay.
How you can do it, avoiding that, what that would be like.
Okay. So if I get the question clarified, so just you're asking how we can still be committed to our spiritual unfolding and the spiritual process of healing, while still being, while still not denying pleasure.
It's a question I'm trying to grasp and address. It seems like there's a temptation to use old strategies.
Okay. Old patterns of consciousness.
Yeah, old patterns of consciousness, old strategies that never work.
Right.
But we're just applying them to a higher level. Instead of fighting and struggling to get the perfect boyfriend or that new car or to get a certain look, now we're fighting and struggling to get spiritual consciousness. And however we define or conceive that to be. And it just seems like there's a contradiction in there, in the sense that it's the old strategies that keep us
bound
to
yeah.
And yet we're trying to use those old strategies to reality.
Right.
And so maybe talk a little about that.
Sure. One thing that I'm really passionate about is like consciousness and how it affects the brain. I've done some research. I speak also at medical conferences, psychology conferences, and one thing which is very interesting as a yoga therapist is that I see a very intimate connection between how we store our emotional issues in the body. My favorite term is that our issues are in the tissues. And we have this way of perpetuating old patterns of consciousness that are actually locked neurologically, and there are actually neural pathways in the brain that are put in place when we perpetuate these same patterns of old patterns of consciousness that don't work for us. And the brain is so used to it, and keeps trying to use those patterns in maybe new ways, if you will. But the key eventually is to understand that as long as when the soul sets its intention to the healing, to one's dharma, to awakening, the transformation, you have the power to create new neural pathways in the brain. And they've actually shown that when you shift your pattern of consciousness, you actually begin to create new neural pathways and new circuitries in the brain. And ultimately, that allows you to experience greater states of consciousness in new ways. But it's not the same way. It's not denying, the old pleasures, if you will. It's like you gave the example. Oh, why can't I have a boyfriend? No, the old way wasn't working. Okay, it's still not saying deny having the boyfriend or deny seeking the partner, life partner. But the old ways of how you thought that was going to happen no longer are working. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just for me, it's authority question because again, it probably takes a whole lifetime to try to
Yeah.
But it does seem kind of like one definition of insanity is pursue a strategy that never works and keep on pursuing it. And I can see how that could apply to the spiritual journey as well. That again, it's like enlightenment is like this big shiny gold apple or something like that we want. And so we pursue the strategy to achieve enlightenment, how it presents to us. In the same way, we pursue all other strategies that always fail, bring us happiness. And I just, it's very subtle because, on one thing, I can see how a spiritual path, pursuing a spiritual path, there's no motivation for doing it, but otherwise we would also stay home and do something else.
Right.
At the same time, it's really easy to use those old, tired, worn out, ineffectual strategies all over again in this new pursuit.
Right.
And how do you kind of steer that force between inaction and action that doesn't work?
Right. I think what eventually happens in order for one to change one's thinking is that a spiritual crisis has to happen. And I think that will allow you the opportunity to change those paths of consciousness and ways of thinking. And in every spiritual crisis, there's an opportunity for growth and expansion. And every spiritual crisis that occurs, we have the ability to consciously choose replaying all the old paths of consciousness that we've acquired in this lifetime. Or we have the ability to say, aha, I have the potential of changing that and transforming that. I always like to give the analogy, and this is maybe a nice way maybe just to conclude, because I know it's almost noon. It's the caterpillar going into the cocoon. A caterpillar doesn't know why it has to go into the cocoon, it just knows it does. And ultimately, when the caterpillar is in the cocoon, it's not quite sure whether it's a caterpillar or a butterfly yet, but it just knows it has to be in this cocoon. When we experience a spiritual crisis, we are in the cocoon. And we know the spiritual crisis is a way for us to transform. And if we're successful, which ultimately we all will be, ultimately we metamorphosize into the butterfly. And just as the butterfly sees the world from a whole new perspective in flight when it has wings than a caterpillar, so all of us can do the same thing. We have the ability to either stay stuck as a caterpillar, replaying all our old movies, if you will, replaying our old paths of consciousness, or we have the ability to go into the cocoon and transform. And the transformation is painful. Being transformed from a caterpillar into a butterfly can be a very traumatic experience. It can be a very challenging experience. It can be a very painful experience. But again, maybe tying into the lecture of today, is that if you use your spiritual practice as a means to ease the pain and the transformation process, you ultimately emerge from the cocoon as a butterfly with grace and with compassion.
That's a lovely note to conclude on. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, if I could just say one more thing. This is the shameless plug part. I have an email. I have a free newsletter, a free email newsletter that I give out. And if you want to be signed up on that newsletter, I talk about spirituality. I talk about Ayurveda and healing, and it has a link to all my yoga retreats I give. Every year, I offer retreats around the world. Ayurveda and yoga healing retreats, spiritual retreats in Kauai, Costa Rica, Bermuda. I've got one coming up in Kauai in less than a month, and I have some flyers for that if you're interested. It's 7 days of deep, intense relaxation and healing and meditation on a private beach in the North Shore of Kauai. Can't beat that. And I also have information on my scheduled yoga classes. I would love to see you in my classes I teach at Yoga Tree. I teach therapeutic yoga, so I'm not going to put you in pretzel twists or anything like that. I teach a restorative therapeutic yoga, which is actually a very gentle, very mild form of yoga that anyone can do. And it's especially beneficial for people who have medical conditions or are in need of healing on whatever level that is. And I use specific yoga poses as a modality of therapy to heal the body. And I have also information on private consultations that I give in Ayurveda and Vedic astrology.
And all of that is on the website?
Yes, it's on the website. And I have flyers as well, so you can just feel free to take as much as you like.
Thank you. Announcements. Our host is Kai.
Yes, I'm the host, Say, and we'll have refreshment later. We have additional contribution from Clint with a wonderful quick bread in addition to what I brought. So we have a lot of people today, but I'm sure there's plenty for everybody to enjoy. If you have tea, please wash your own cups. And also, we have Danable out there, and that's how we raise funds to run our program. So please put your contribution to Danable. $5 is the suggested donation level. If you can give more, please do so, because we have a lot of expenses we need to meet. But if you can, just put whatever you can. There may be a group of people who will go out to have lunch together. So if you're interested in that, just stay around and look and see who's gathering. If that pattern is not really clearly emerging to you, just let me know. Maybe I'll find out who's going. Thank you.
Clint.
October 3rd is Castle Street Fair. For the first time, we will actually have a booth there. And I'm kind of heading that effort. And I'm looking for people who want to staff that booth for maybe an hour or longer if you want. I already have some people, but it would be nice to have a few more. And it should be fun. And it should be like a minimal commitment, fair or anything. So I'll be outside. If you're interested, that sounds cool. Talk to me. Talk to your name and number.
Snake.
I'm the snail mail coordinator for the group. For those who don't know it, we maintain a post office box on Missioner Market, Sanchez, I think it is. And I expect to be moving within 4 to 6 weeks. And so if someone would take up that, it involves, I go every week, but every 2 weeks the world in class just twice a month, say. And I have the keys to do that. And it can be done 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Of course, if you live in the Castro, it would be more convenient. But I just want to pass it on. Hope someone will take it up.
David.
Quickly, if you would like to host potluck, please talk to me. I don't know if that's on next week.
Yes, Kai has been very generous on this place, and there will be a notice in the newsletter as well.
Okay, I'd like to get in for October. The newsletter is next week. This is what we done. So if you have an offer for that.
George.
Yes, a reminder that talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org.
Kai again.
Yes, I'm now talking about retreat. Our annual retreat is coming up. That's going to be next weekend. This weekend is probably the last chance to sign up because I have to confirm the number of attendants with the Vajrapani early next week. So if you're interested in going, please fill out the registration form and give it to me, or give me a call as soon as possible. There are still spaces available in dorm rooms. All cabins are now taken. If you are going to retreat and need transportation arrangement made, and you still haven't found, for example, the couple and partner, please let me know because I try to make whatever the arrangement needs to be made early this week. Thank you.
Just a reminder, we will be meeting here next week.
Okay, great. Thank you again.
You're very welcome.
Let's get in the circle.
Absolutely. So I've been asked to offer a special closing prayer for our closing circle. I'd like to offer a Sanskrit mantra. I think it's very appropriate for the talk for today. So just close our eyes. Feel the oneness and the unity of us all. Allow the sounds, the vibrations of the mantra to deeply penetrate and heal every level of your being. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Please lead me from illusion to the truth, from darkness to the light, from the cycles of death and rebirth to spiritual liberation. Om peace, peace, peace. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.